I was 74 when my son decided I was something that needed managing. That's a polite word, managing. It sounds like care, sounds like concern. But what it really meant was this: I had become inconvenient to the life he wanted to show off. The message came on a Tuesday afternoon while the kettle was still singing on the stove, and the smell of chamomile filled my small kitchen. My phone buzzed once, then again. I wiped my hands on a dish towel before picking it up, already smiling, already expecting something ordinary. A photo of the ocean, maybe. A question about the dog. Something that still sounded like family. Instead, it said, "Mom, you're not coming on the cruise anymore. Aaron doesn't want to babysit an old woman." No greeting, no softness, just that. I read it 3 times, slowly, like the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder if I gave them enough time. Babysit, old woman. I sat down at the small table by the window, the one my late husband built with his own hands when we downsized, and I felt something in my chest shift, not break. Breakage is loud. This was quieter, like a foundation cracking under a house that still looks beautiful from the street. I had paid for that house, not this little one where I now lived alone with my plants and my memories. I mean their house, the one my son and his wife posted photos of every holiday, the one everyone assumed was theirs because it fit so neatly into the story they told about themselves. $500,000, that was the number. Clean, round, the full price, paid in cash. I had handed them the keys with my own hands and told myself it was love, told myself it was legacy, told myself this is what mothers do when they want their children to be safe in a world that never quite is. What I didn't tell them, what I didn't announce or dramatize, was that the deed stayed with me, not out of suspicion, not even fear, habit. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn that paperwork is just memory written in ink, and memory, unlike people, doesn't lie to make itself more comfortable. I poured the tea. It had gone cold while I sat there. I didn't reheat it. I thought about my husband, David, about how he used to say, "A house is only strong where you can't see it," about how he never trusted pretty exteriors without checking what was holding them up. I thought about my son, Andrew, about the boy who used to sleep with his feet hanging off the bed because he grew too fast, about the teenager who needed reminding to say thank you, about the man who now thought embarrassment was worse than cruelty. I didn't reply to the text. Silence, I've learned, is sometimes the only language people like that understand. That evening, I opened the old metal file cabinet in my bedroom. The drawer still stuck the way it always had. I tugged it free and found the folder I hadn't touched in years. Deeding, puppy, purchase agreement, title insurance, all my name, all intact, all patient. The next morning, while they were somewhere over open water, clinking glasses and pretending I didn't exist, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a real estate attorney who owed me a favor from 20 years earlier. The second was to a woman I had once helped when she was 17 and scared and brilliant and broke. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Hale," she said, disbelief warming her voice. "Is it really you?" "It's me," I said, "and I need to give something back." By noon, the house was listed. Not publicly, quietly, precisely. A cash sale, fast close. People imagine revenge as anger. They imagine shouting, slammed doors, tears. But the truth is, the most dangerous decisions I've ever made were made while completely calm. The buyer didn't even tour the house. He trusted the numbers, trusted the location, trusted the paperwork. By Friday, the money had cleared. By Monday, the locks were changed. I didn't go to the house. I didn't need to see it again. I had already said goodbye years earlier, when gratitude turned into expectation. What I did do was sign one more set of documents. The house, every room, every polished surface, every square foot of borrowed pride, was donated to a foundation that housed families with sick children, not as a gesture, as a correction. A woman and her son moved in the same afternoon my son's ship docked. I wasn't there when Andrew tried his key. I wasn't there when confusion turned into panic, then into rage. But I was there when my phone rang. "Mom," he said, breathless, furious. "What did you do?" I looked around my kitchen, the quiet, the sun on the counter, the simple dignity of a space that belonged to me. "I finished something," I said. He shouted. He accused. He reminded me of everything he thought I owed him. I let him speak until his voice cracked under the weight of his own entitlement. Then I said, "You didn't want to be burdened." Silence. "So I set you free." I hung up. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at a small college. They wanted me to talk about legacy, about planning, about what it means to build something that lasts. I stood at the podium, hands steady, voice sure. I didn't mention my son. I didn't mention the cruise. I talked about foundations, about how love without boundaries collapses under its own weight, about how dignity is not something your children grant you, it's something you must defend, even from them. When I finished, a young woman came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I hope I'm like you someday," she said. I smiled. "I hope you don't have to be," I told her. "But if you do, remember this. People think aging makes you weaker. What it really does is strip away the lies you no longer have time to believe. And that, I've found, is a kind of freedom no one can ever take back." I thought the hardest part would be the selling. I thought the hardest part would be signing my name on a line that would undo the story my son liked to tell at parties. I thought it would be the guilt that came later, like a stray dog that keeps following you home no matter how many times you shoo it away. But the truth is, the hardest part wasn't the paperwork, it was the waiting. It was the quiet in the days after, when the world kept moving as if nothing had happened, while my phone sat like a sleeping animal on the table, still, but ready to bite. Because when you do something clean and final, people who live off mess don't know how to respond to it. They can't argue with a deed, they can't charm a bank transfer, they can't negotiate with a signature that's already dried. So they do what they always do, they come for the heart. The first week after the locks were changed, Andrew didn't call me at all. He sent messages, short ones, sharp ones, like pebbles thrown at a window. "This is sick. You humiliated us. How could you do this to your own son? Aaron's parents are laughing. You've ruined our life." I read them without answering. I didn't block him. Blocking is dramatic. Blocking is a slam. I wanted him to feel what I felt when I read his text about babysitting an old woman. I wanted him to stare at silence and realize silence can be a mirror. The second week, he started calling. Not once, not twice. He called like a man trying to force a door open with his shoulder. 10 times in a row, sometimes at midnight, sometimes before sunrise, like he imagined exhaustion would loosen my judgment. I turned the ringer off. At my age, sleep is a blessing you don't waste on other people's tantrums. Still, even with the ringer off, I could feel it. The phone lighting up like a heartbeat against the wood, his name flashing on the screen the way a storm flashes at the edge of the sky, warning you it's coming whether you want it or not. One afternoon, I went for a walk, just to prove to myself I could move through the world without my son controlling the weather in my chest. The air was cool, and the sidewalk had that faint, chalky smell from morning sprinklers. A neighbor waved. A dog barked. A child's bike clattered down a driveway like joy was still allowed to make noise. When I came back, there was a note on my door. Not tucked politely under the mat, not placed gently in the mailbox. It was taped to the center of the door like a public announcement. "We need to talk. Call me, Andrew," all caps. No love, no please, not even my name. I peeled it off slowly, feeling the tape resist, the paper tear a little at the edge. I stood there holding it in my hand like it was a dead insect. That was when I understood something. He didn't miss me. He missed the version of me that stayed useful. That night, I dreamed of my husband. David always came in my dreams the way he came in life. Quiet, steady, like a man who didn't believe in wasting words. He sat at the edge of our old bed, the one with the creaky frame and the quilt my mother stitched from scraps. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at me with that patient disappointment he saved for moments when I tried to shrink myself to avoid conflict. "You still trying to raise a man who refuses to grow?" he asked. I woke up with my mouth dry and my heart beating like it had been running. The next morning I made oatmeal, the plain kind, the kind that tastes like discipline, and I sat down at my table with my tea and my files and a yellow legal pad. I wrote a list, not of what I had done, of what I was willing to do next. Because if there's one thing grief taught me, it's this: you don't get to undo everything, but you do get to choose what happens after. I chose boundaries with teeth. By the third week, the voicemail messages changed. The rage softened into performance. That's what manipulative people do when anger doesn't work. They become wounded. They become poetic. They become the victim of your spine. "Mom," he said in one voicemail, voice thick like he'd been crying, "I don't know who you are anymore." I listened to that one twice. Not because it moved me, but because it was almost funny how close it came to the truth. He didn't know who I was anymore because he'd never bothered to learn. He knew what I gave. He knew what I fixed. He knew what I covered up so no one saw the cracks in the picture-perfect life he wanted. But he didn't know the woman who survived losing a husband. The woman who learned how to sign documents with shaking hands. The woman who sat with loneliness like it was a roommate and still made herself breakfast. That woman was unfamiliar to him, and that was not my problem. On a Sunday, I went to a small church service. I sat in the back row the way I always did now. I wasn't hiding. I just liked the quiet there. The choir sounded like old gold. The preacher talked about stewardship, about how the things we're given aren't always meant to be hoarded. Afterward, in the parking lot, an older woman touched my elbow gently. "I heard," she said, not unkindly. "People hear everything. That's the truth about communities. They will gossip about your grief and call it concern. They will chew on your pain like it's something sweet."
I looked at her and said, I hope it gives someone courage. She blinked, surprised. Then she nodded. Because even the ones who whisper still understand a woman who finally stands. That evening, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real envelope, thick paper, a lawyer's letterhead. Andrew's wife, Erin, had hired counsel. They claimed the house had been a gift. They claimed reliance. They claimed emotional harm, as if emotions are currency you can deposit after you spent years withdrawing without permission. I stared at that letter for a long time, my tea growing cold beside it. Then I laughed once, a short sound. Not because it was amusing, because it was predictable. They thought the world worked like their dinner parties. Show up dressed well, say the right words, and reality will politely step aside. But reality doesn't care about your brand. Reality cares about documents. I called my attorney the next day. Her name was Maris. She was younger than me, but her mind was a scalpel. She read the letter, hummed once, and said they're bluffing. And even if they weren't, they don't have legal footing. Good, I said. Then I added, but I want more than good. I want done. Maris was quiet for a moment. Then she said, then we go on a fence. That's a phrase I used to hate. It sounded like war. And I've had enough war inside my own family to last 2 lifetimes. But Maris explained it simply. You have a case for harassment, for coercive control, for financial abuse if there's anything they used your accounts for. And if they keep escalating, we can file a protective order. Protective order. The phrase sat heavy in my mouth, like admitting my child was now someone I needed protection from. I stared out my kitchen window at the small bird feeder David had hung years ago. It swayed a little in the wind. A finch landed on it like the world was still safe enough for small things to trust. I don't want to ruin him, I said. Maris's voice softened, but it didn't weaken. Mrs. Hale, he ruined himself. You're just refusing to be collateral. That night I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened the old photo box. Not the neat album, the box. The one where pictures live without order, without captions, without the polite narrative people prefer. There was Andrew at 5, missing his front tooth, holding a popsicle like it was a trophy. There was Andrew at 12, sulking in a school picture because he thought he looked awkward. There was Andrew at 22, hugging his father on graduation day, eyes bright with the kind of hope that feels like it could last forever if you're careful with it. I held those photos in my hands and realized I was grieving a living person. That grief is strange. There's no funeral, no casseroles, no sympathy cards, just you and your memories, trying to figure out when the boy became a man who could babysit an old woman and still sleep at night. A week later, the inevitable happened. He showed up. It was raining that day, not hard, just steady enough to make the world smell like wet asphalt and old leaves. I heard a knock. Not a gentle knock, a firm one, like he was trying to remind the door who used to walk through it. I didn't rush. I set my mug down. I walked slowly to the door. I looked through the peephole. Andrew stood there in a dark coat, wet hair, jaw tight. His wife stood behind him, arms folded, eyes sharp. They looked like they had rehearsed. I opened the door just enough to stand in it. Not inviting, not fearful, just present. You need to talk. I nodded once. You can talk. He blinked. That wasn't what he meant. He meant I should listen. He meant I should soften. His wife stepped forward, leaning into the doorway like entitlement could cross a threshold by force of attitude. We're here to resolve this, she said, like adults. I looked at her, really looked. She was beautiful in the polished way some people are. Hair perfect, nails done, perfume expensive. She had a face that expected doors to open for it. And I realized something else. This woman wasn't the poison. She was the proof. Proof that Andrew had chosen a life where appearances matter more than people. I kept my voice even. Adults don't text their mothers like their house staff. Andrew's face tightened. You're making this bigger than it is. I smiled a little, tired. That's what people say when the truth doesn't benefit them. He took a breath, trying the softer approach. Mom, we made a mistake, okay? We were stressed. The cruise was a work thing. You don't understand what it's like. I raised my hand gently. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that you wanted me to disappear so your life could feel cleaner. His eyes flashed. That's not fair. I shrugged. Fair isn't the point. True is the point. His wife cut in, voice sharp now. You can't just take someone's home. I tilted my head. I didn't. I donated my property. Andrew stepped forward, and I could see it. The old temper. The one that always lived under his charm like a hidden knife. You did this to punish us, he hissed. I nodded slowly. No, I did it to correct something I helped create. He stared at me like he didn't know what language I was speaking. I continued, voice low. I gave you a house without requiring character. I gave you security without teaching responsibility. That was my mistake. His wife scoffed. So now you're trying to play saint with charity. I looked at her, and my voice turned colder. Not cruel, just final. The family living there now has a child who fought leukemia, I said. Their laughter has more value than your pride. Andrew's face changed at that. A flicker of shame. Quick, like a light turning on and off. For a moment I saw the boy again, and then he swallowed it, like he always did. He tried another angle. The oldest one. Guilt. "So that's it?" he said, voice softer, eyes wet. "You're just done with me." There it was. The hook, the rope he wanted to loop around my mother heart and pull until I caved. I breathed in. Then I said the thing that took me decades to learn how to say without shaking. "I'm not done loving you," I told him. "I'm done enabling you." His lips parted, like he had a dozen words ready, but none of them worked against that. Behind him, rain hit the sidewalk in quiet beads. The world kept falling and falling, indifferent. He looked past me into my small home, the simple furniture, the framed picture of David, the plant on the windowsill, and I realized he wasn't looking at my life. He was calculating what it could still give him. "Mom," he said, voice changing again, "we're in a tight spot. We need help. Just temporarily. Help." The way he said it, it didn't sound like humility. It sounded like a demand dressed in desperation. I nodded slowly, as if considering. Then I stepped back, not to let him in, but to reach for something on the little side table near the door. An envelope. I handed it to him. He took it, confused, and opened it. Inside were copies of my updated documents, trust, power of attorney assigned to my attorney, and a neutral third party, medical directives, financial controls, everything fortified. His face went pale. "What is this?" he whispered. "This," I said, "is me making sure no one can ever lock me into anything again." His wife's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing us of something?" I met her gaze. "I'm preventing it." Andrew looked up at me, anger and panic wrestling behind his eyes. "You think I'd steal from you?" he demanded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I think you already did," I said quietly. "Just not with your hands." He stared, confused. I let the words land. "You stole my dignity. You stole my place in your life. You stole the right to be spoken to with basic respect." He flinched like I'd slapped him. For a moment the rain seemed louder. Then his wife grabbed his arm. "This is pointless," she snapped. "She's enjoying this." I wasn't enjoying it, but I was finished pretending pain was the same as regret. Andrew stepped back, eyes shining, voice raw now. "You know what, Mom?" he said. "Fine. Be alone. See who comes to visit you when you're really old." I looked at him, at the cruelty he chose when he couldn't control the outcome, and something in me settled, like dust finally falling after a long demolition. "I am old," I said, "and I am not alone." I nodded toward the photo of David behind me.